Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I am here with Tanya Akimenko. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So Tanya has been a tax accountant for 20 years now, and she helps small business owners understand their finances because it's the heartbeat of every business, and that's absolutely correct. And we happen to be in the heart of tax season, so I appreciate you taking the time because we're going to definitely dive into a whole bunch of really good information that I think can help people. So let me just start by asking, what made you want to get into this business?
I always enjoyed accounting in general.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to give away my age, but I took an accounting class in high school. This was way before computers. Everything had to be on paper
Uh-huh.
and with a calculator, with everything. And to me, it was always like not just a number game, but it was always like a puzzle with accounting. Like everything had to match. So
Mm.
I always enjoyed it. And then I moved to Delta Junction, Alaska, and in the small city that where we lived, the closest like accountant was like 2 hours away.
Wow.
And yeah, so I was in a situation where I need to do some payroll and things like that, and there was nobody around, and I'm like, I'm just gonna learn this myself. And
Mm-hmm.
this was before the super fast internet and the colleges were online and stuff like that. So I started doing the distance learning
Wow.
and learned from there. Called the IRS, ordered their publications to be mailed to me, studied
Wow.
them, highlighted them. Yeah, so
Wow.
that was fun.
That's awesome. So I'm sure you became very popular in your area then because you saved people 2 hours from driving.
I did, yeah, because again, this was like before you could upload tax documents. It's so easy now. I
Yeah.
still have customers that I started out with back in Delta
Wow.
Junction, Alaska. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, good for you. So, taxes is one of those things where as soon as somebody brings up something to me, and in fact, my payroll company is one of these, they're like, hey, we need to discuss the tax this form and that form, and I don't even want to have the conversation. I immediately forward them to my CPA and I say, I don't speak that language. I wish I did. I don't want to get it wrong because taxes are scary. You're afraid to make a mistake on taxes because you feel like, if I make a mistake, that's costly.
Yeah. In all reality, the IRS is the most powerful collection agency in the US.
I know, and it's
And
awful. They have me petrified. Like I'm so afraid to make a mistake. So I don't even want to like attempt because if I do it wrong and I have done it wrong. Like when I was a very, very small business and it was just me doing all the bookkeeping and everything. I filed taxes and I did something wrong. And it was just something silly. Like it wasn't even anything that was huge. But the fine that I had to pay and then all the interest that they tack on and there's just oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. So for
yeah,
me, it's the peace of mind of knowing that it's done right. I just send it off to a CPA and I'm happy to do it.
yeah. And especially like you mentioned, I don't understand that language.
Yeah.
Most business owners don't. And
Yeah.
what I came to realize really quick actually was like my first tax appointment. I'm over here sitting, explaining her taxes to her, telling her, and she's looking at me like, and then she goes, listen, I did not understand anything you said. Do it over, but in the language I understand. So
Ooh.
literally like one of my very first appointments, I was like, okay, people really don't understand what I studied. So I
Mm-mm.
break it
Really?
down. Yeah, and I really try and like now I have employees and everything, and part of my training is like we communicate accounting language, but that does not mean our clients know. So
Mm-mm.
we communicate in everyday language with our clients.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for saying that because even things like did you file your 1020 or your, and then I know like there's a 1099 and then there's a W-9 and there's this and it's just all of these forms. Like I just have them just posted on my desk. I'm like, okay, this is the form that I send as a vendor. This is the form that I send to my contractors. I'm like,
Yeah,
it's confusing. So yeah, there's a lot to know and the tax code changes frequently, right?
all the time. That's why we have to
Mhm.
study it every single year.
Absolutely. So, and I mean, that's kind of the point of even having my CPA is that when the tax code is changing rapidly, I want to know that there's somebody who's paying attention to that because I can only pay attention to so many other things in my business and be able to still keep it above water.
That's true.
So talk to me about small business accounting specifically. So I know that a lot of small businesses, and I hear this all the time, that they say, I'm really good at running my business, but I hate the bookkeeping and the money stuff. How do I, like how do I manage the bookkeeping stuff? And I mean, I can see that because I'll get in the weeds. And when I was first starting my business 10 years ago, I would get into the weeds with my business and I realized I hadn't reconciled anything in a month and or 2 months and I hadn't, sent invoices out in a month and I hadn't done this and this and there's so much to do. And what do you recommend for a small business to be able to stay on top of that?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the struggles every business owner faces all the
Yeah.
time. And they're either like afraid to even look at their numbers or they just find the task such a hideous. And
Mm-hmm.
there's really no one answer. Everyone needs to know themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a better person, like in the morning, you get those tasks done that are more annoying, then do it in the morning. If you're in
Mm-hmm.
the evening, do it in the evening. But like, don't force yourself when you're mentally not capable, or like, but also simplify everything. Simplify your process, simplify how you track your income and expenses. Like you said, not sending out invoices. That's important because that's money in. So put
Mm-hmm.
it on your calendar. Like every Monday, you're sending out invoices, and build habits. So start with small and build habits. And again, just make it easier. A lot of times when business owners start out, they don't need those fancy accounting software. A spreadsheet is just fine. Something that you understand that you can do. Especially when like you can't afford an accountant or a CPA to you just forward everything to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, and we have we're finally at that place now where I have an office manager and we have an outside third party bookkeeper and then of course we have an outside CPA. But those are all things that are nice to have, but not every business can afford it. Where would you start? Would you start with bookkeeping or CPA or taxes, or if you were a small business, where would you say to strategize first?
Definitely with bookkeeping because those are your numbers.
Hmm.
Bookkeeping and tax preparation are two different things. Most people think it's the same thing. They'll just bring, and I still have some people just bring me a box of stuff and they're like, here, do my taxes. I got to do your bookkeeping before I can even get into your taxes. So
Uh-huh.
those are two different things, but definitely start with bookkeeping. And
Hmm.
like you have a bookkeeper and a CPA, those are two different people.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the bookkeeping part is that's going to tell you your finances, your how much money's in, how much money's out. That's going to tell your story. So definitely start with that.
Okay. Okay. So start with a bookkeeper. And would you say monthly or quarterly, or how often should you have a bookkeeper looking at your books?
At least a monthly for sure.
Okay, awesome. So, if I have a bookkeeper who's going through and reconciling monthly, and that's one of the biggest things for us is, we have a lot of employees and we have several states and, we have payroll in two different, EINs, and so we have it's complicated. So we make sure that we're on top of this every single month, if not every single week. But not all small business owners, and even 10 years ago when I was doing it myself. Like I was saying, I'd go a few months without reconciling and then I'd just be inundated. And then you're trying to figure out, oh crap, when did I go to that store and what did I buy and what was that for? And So there's a lot. I know that when I first started, I used to scan in all my receipts. Is that still something that we need to be doing?
Yes, you still need to save all your receipts. Scanning them is the best because you have a digital copy.
Hmm.
But yes, if I've sat in quite a few audits because I do audit representation. And yes, the IRS does want to see your receipt. Bank statements is not enough or credit card statements because they will show you where you spent the money and the date and how much, but they won't say what you bought. Those are the receipts. So definitely still, I know it's hideous and
Hmm.
tedious and it's annoying, but yes, you need the receipts.
Okay, good. That's good advice. I appreciate that. So what services or products do you use or recommend for bookkeeping for a small business?
Um, Depending on if they can afford it, QuickBooks is the best software there is.
Hmm.
Many try to compete with it, but fail. QuickBooks is just well above everybody else. If you are really, really tight on funds and can't afford it, a wave accounting has come a long way. It's much cheaper, but it's
Hmm.
also nowhere near as good as QuickBooks. However, if you're working with a QuickBooks Pro advisor, they QuickBooks came out with this QuickBooks Ledger, which is affordable and you can keep track of your bookkeeping, but it has to go through a QuickBooks Pro advisor. It's not available to just anybody.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then, yeah.
Hmm.
And then also, you can even just start with a spreadsheet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even just an Excel spreadsheet is better than nothing. At
Yeah.
least you're tracking. So, okay, well, very good. Thank you. So, when we're talking about bookkeeping and accounting, and so you make a statement that ignoring them can lead to business failure. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, a lot of times people start a business, they're working and they think they're profitable, or like if they're doing multiple things, multiple services or multiple products, and they're not tracking the exact expenses, they
Hmm.
might think they're profitable, but in reality, they might be losing on a service or a product. And unless you have that bookkeeping, unless you know, you won't know. You won't know if you're profitable or not. But this way you can adjust your prices and things like that if you're keeping track of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that comes down to really knowing your numbers, right? Like if you watch, like let's just give example, like Shark Tank or any of these other
Yeah.
kind of business shows, they talk about knowing your numbers. And sometimes that means what is your profitability on the product or service that you're selling. So there's revenue, there's profit, and there's expenses, right? And so revenue is obviously your gross amount, and then profit is what you have left after expenses. Is that right?
Yeah. It could
S-
be variations of profit, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
basically in the simplest terms.
In the simplest terms, yes. And so, but when you have cost of goods sold, then that's the, can you, I'm going to say it, but I'll butcher it. So why don't you tell me what cost of goods sold means?
So if you're looking overall at your expenses, the cost of goods sold, to easily understand, it's direct expense. Like what does it actually cost me to produce or to provide the service? Direct expense. And then other expenses would be like your overhead, so like your office expense, like your cell phone, like the softwares you're using, things like that.
Okay. So give me an example of cost of goods sold versus the things that are outside of that. Like you just said, well, outside of that would be cell phone rents, things like that.
Yeah. So if we're talking about like you're selling a book as one of
Hmm.
your products, right,
Hmm.
the direct expense would be um s- hiring a publisher specifically for that book, hiring a proofreader. I might be
Hmm.
using the wrong words. The person
Or
who
editor,
proofreads
yeah.
your editor, thank you.
Uh-huh.
That's a direct expense because that's an expense specifically to that book, to that product. And then, of course, printing those books. And then, of course, shipping and setting it up, marketing, even marketing specifically for that book is direct expense.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really important to understand what your cost of goods sold is so that you know how much margin you have. And this is one of the things that we do is, when we're trying to decide on pricing for, we do staffing. And so if we're trying to come up with a staffing price, we need to understand how much it's going to cost us in that state to hire someone, put them to work, give them a uniform, get them trained. And all of that falls under cost of goods sold because we have to provide a service, which is staffing. And in order for us to do staffing, we have to understand what it costs us to actually put somebody in the position, including benefits, taxes, insurance, so forth.
Yeah, so those would be your direct expenses versus you and your assistant, those are overhead.
Right, exactly. Okay, very cool. So, what misconceptions do entrepreneurs typically have about bookkeeping?
Um, I would say that it's hard. They they
Yeah,
listen to accounting, language and things like that, and it's not like they studied. And I would say they kind of have a freak out moment, like, "Oh, I don't understand. This is too hard. I don't want to do this," you know.
right.
But once you actually sit down and if you hire an accountant and actually ask them, hey, can you go over my reports with me so I can understand them? Like that's what I found just doing the bookkeeping and be like, hey, this is your report was actually a disservice because they're like, oh, awesome, cool. I got a report, you know? So
Uh-huh.
every new customer we sign up, for bookkeeping services, the first month, the first time we send them a report, we actually do a Zoom and we literally go over their report, how they read it, how they can implement it, how can they make better business decisions financially.
Awesome. Okay, very cool. So, you mentioned, so let's go back to the tax thing because, again, it's tax season and we're about to all get hit over the head with all this stuff right now. So tell me, if somebody ends up with a big tax bill, like let's just say you submit everything, comes back, and now you owe this massive amount of money that you were not expecting, because that's the one part about being a business owner that kind of sucks, is depending on how your company is structured means you're paying taxes differently. So whether it's an LLC or an S corp or a C corp, that all has a different tax structure. So what do business owners do if they can't afford the tax bill?
So a lot of times people actually don't know, but IRS can set up a payment plan for you. If
Okay.
you if it's under a certain amount and Um, let's just say under $50,000, you divide that by 72 and it's 72 months worth of payments. That's what you can afford. You can fill out the payment plan online
Hmm.
and the IRS will usually accept it. But then what you really should focus on is correcting the situation and then going forward doing it right. So do the estimated payments. If you owed last year, you're going to owe this year. So make
Hmm.
sure you pay the estimated payments throughout the year so you're not hit with that huge bill.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Because that's not a fun thing to have. I know we've had those moments where we're like, "Hey, we had a great year." And then all of a sudden we get the tax bill. We're like, oh, yikes, we had a great year. That sucked. So there are definitely those moments of, celebration is short-lived when you realize how much you have to pay in taxes after that. So,
Yeah.
hmm
And that
So
eats at your profit too.
yeah, because, here you are thinking that you've done really well, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, yeah, we didn't do as well as I thought because now all this money has to go away to the government. So,
Yeah.
my accountant one year, we had finally, and this is after years of bootstrapping and barely making a profit and kind of eking by. We finally had a great year, and my accountant was like, "Hey, you had a really good year," and I'm like, "Yeah, it was great. I feel so good about it." And then he tells me, he's like, well, you're going to owe this much in taxes. And I was so mad and I was so angry that I had to pay in so much money in taxes after so many years of just trying and building this business and finally getting to the point where we're like, we have a profit. And and then he tells me I have all this money to pay to the government. I'm like, why didn't you warn me that I should have spent the money? And so he's like, what do you mean? I said, I don't want to have to like I could have spent this money on things that we were going to spend this year and like I could have, invested ahead of time and done all these other things to create tax savings. And he's like, Angela, he said, are you saying that you would rather spend $1 than pay 30 cents to the government? And I said, yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that. So, and he warned me and he said, listen, just put the money in the bank, pay the government, and you'll be happy that you have money in the bank. You're starting off the year right. And I just really was struggling with it. And I was just so angry that he hadn't prepared me to, go and spend money that I, could have saved from having to pay to the government. I was so angry. And then a few months later, COVID happened. And when
Oh,
COVID happened, we were able to get through the entire year, even though we were shut down for 5 whole months because we had money in the bank. So we were one of the few companies that survived in my industry. And he says, see, now aren't you glad you had money in the bank?
yeah, for sure.
But it was, yeah. So lesson learned, and he was right, of course. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, but he was exactly right. So listen to your CPAs. So tell me what tax strategies would you give to small business owners?
Um, I actually created a tax deduction cheat sheet because a lot of times small business owners might have tax, and I've actually experienced this with my customers. They have
Yeah.
tax deductions, but they don't realize it's a business deduction. And they're like,
Uh,
what? I could have deducted that? What? That's a business deduction because so many people are scared of the IRS. I don't want to do anything wrong.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, so I created a cheat sheet that kind of helps you think outside the box on each of the deductions. Just kind of, there's a lot of deductions, of course. These are just like the 10 main ones, but it also gives you kind of an idea, hey, what else could be tax deductible for my business? Because all industries are different. What's
yeah.
tax deductible for one might not be tax deductible for another.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So can you give me some of those?
Yes, so one of them is an office. A lot of people think, oh, I have a home office and that's a deduction. I use my dining room. I use it 100% for my business. No, you don't because it's a dining room and I'm sure you ate food there once.
Right.
For a home office to be truly tax deductible, it has to be a designated, 100% designated, not shared with the family,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
shared with your clothes, if you're doing it a closet or whatever, it has to be 100% designated. So I always say designate a space in your home,
yeah,
like put a desk. It's, instead of the dining room, if you want to use the dining space area, instead of a dining room, put a computer desk there, set up your computer there, take a picture for proof that
yeah,
it's not
yeah,
a dining room. You have all your stuff, that you have your screens and keyboard and stuff, and it'd be hard to eat at that office desk.
yeah, yeah, really. Yeah. Well, I eat at my office desk all the time, but it's like only because I always work. But
Same, same.
but
But
yeah.
it's designated office
Yes, it
space.
is a designated office though, for sure. Okay, that's helpful. What about vehicles?
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation with vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have two options. You either use actual expenses, that's when you depreciate the vehicle, that's where you use the gas receipts, use the maintenance receipts, or you use the miles. What a lot of people don't know is it has to be designated for the business, so you have to have another vehicle. A lot of times it's just easier to claim mileage. Also,
Mm-hmm.
if you claim actual expenses, once you sell the vehicle or trade it in, you have to report that back as income. And a lot of people
Mm.
don't know that. And a lot of people forget that.
Hmm.
And that could get
Interesting.
you in trouble.
Yeah, yeah, really. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. So, would you recommend leasing a vehicle then? Because a lease is a tax write-off, isn't it?
If it's used for business, 100%. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You have to, I would recommend leasing. I actually recommend if it's financially working for you, because there is no one size fits all. Some people are freaking out about leasing. They're like, no way would I lease a vehicle ever. So please don't lease if that's your mindset.
Right, right.
Other people are like, I'd rather lease and just pay, write it off on my taxes. I have a personal vehicle as well that's paid off just, that I use sometimes for personal reasons.
Yeah.
Then if that's your mindset, then yeah, lease the vehicle. But financial decisions are 100% emotional decisions. People like to think they're logical, but they're not. They're
Mm-hmm.
emotional, and our emotions are tied in from like even a very young age from our parents instilled how we view money and how we view debt and how we view income and then just in general. So it all depends on how you feel and what works for you.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So, so I know that aside from the things that we think of all the time, like a vehicle or an office, there are other write-offs that you can make. What about travel?
It has to be for business purposes. So if
Mm-hmm.
you are traveling, you should record that the reason you traveled. And honestly, the best way is send an email to your tax account and be like, "Hey, I'm going to this trip and I'm going to be doing this." And that creates proof
Uh-huh.
that you sent. It has a date stamp and it's to your accountant that's going to do your tax return.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. So, and then one of the other things that I think is really important that a lot of small businesses don't do and they need to be doing is keep all of your finances separate from the business.
100%. Yeah, do not commingle funds.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you have an LLC or a corporation, because that's literally piercing the corporate veil, as they call it. That's you saying, no, me and my business are one, not separated.
Right. And then your liability is what is affected. So it's not just finances, it's liability. And then one of the reasons that you set up a corporation or an LLC is for that liability protection, so that somebody can't come sue you and take your house. But at the same time, if you're commingling expenses and you're not separating the business from yourself, then legally you're not going to find that that's going to be easy to do either for liability purposes.
I would agree, but that's more lawyer questions.
Yes, yes, exactly. Um, all right. So tell me a little bit more about tax strategies as a small business. What can I be doing right now to prepare myself for the tax deadlines?
Um, really just, well, if you're just now starting to prepare, I don't know when this episode's gonna go out, but if you're just starting out, I would say you're already kind of late because you're gonna
Uh-huh.
be in a rush. You're gonna forget things. It's
Hmm.
much better to prepare throughout the whole year. And then you mentioned tax strategy. Tax laws change every single year. And I recommend reaching out to your tax accountant in the summer because that's usually when they slow down and just ask
Hmm.
for a tax strategy. Hey, can you look into my situation? Are there tax laws that are changing? Should I be doing something else? Because tax preparation, that's like recording the history of what happened. Tax planning, that's actually planning what's going to happen. That's setting up goals and things like that. So those are two different things. And
Okay.
usually when the tax account is preparing your taxes, they're trying to meet the deadline. They
Mm.
don't they probably don't even have like the mental capacity to plan just
Yes.
because they're so focused on getting this, on the compliance part. So
Hmm.
yeah, to prepare for a strategy, I recommend reaching out like in the summer and asking those questions for sure.
Okay. All right. Very nice. So, so as women, we give away our power all the time, in different ways. So how have you ever given your power away as a woman in business?
That's actually a really good question. And it's so true with women. It's
Uh-huh.
so different than with men. And I have both women and men in business as my
Mm-hmm.
clients, and we are so different how we make business decisions and things like that. So I would say I'm much stronger now in my personality, but in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, especially when I have a customer who is like strong-willed and strong-minded, and I'm like, here are my services, here are my prices, and they want to switch it up. They're like, no,
Mm-hmm.
I want this price, I want this service, and it's like, no, no, but I have this. So a lot of times, in the beginning, I'm more strict now But
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, I was like, okay, fine, I'll add this on for no additional price, you know? So, and then I realized I'm giving my power away to my customers, and then they're calling me and interrupting me like with family time. I have no time for my daughter. Meanwhile, they're taking vacations, they're doing things like
Yeah.
that. And I was like, no, I gotta be more firm. Like these are the services, this is the price. I've done the calculation, this is what it costs me, and this is what I need to stay in business. And I've literally had to let some of my customers go. And others I've told, listen, do you want me to do your taxes next year? And they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, of course. I'm like, then I need to be here next year.
Yes, yes, 100%. I agree with you. And I think for women, we underprice ourselves quite a lot because we feel bad. And,
Yeah,
again, it's just one of those ways that we give our power away is that we feel guilty for asking what we feel, we deserve. So,
that's so true. And like
mm,
I've noticed that in other women businesses too, while the men, they're like, oh, they charge, and I'm like, what?
yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the differences too.
Hmm. So what obstacles have you had to overcome in starting your business?
So I actually had quite a few, like from the beginning when I started out, I did the whole long distance learning. It was in the middle of Alaska. There was no fast internet. No college was online, really.
Yeah.
Maybe the Phoenix one was just starting out, I think, or something.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I had to like mail in my tests and stuff like that. I had to find a person who would watch me take my test.
Wow.
But I feel like because even though I had the books and I had a professor that I could, email back then, yeah. Um, I learned a lot because it was so much hands-on. Like I had to do so much research initially. So like I feel like I have a different perspective because it was like that, because of my journey. And then just in general, I went through a divorce and then I thought accounting, who's gonna go for an accountant, it's only during taxes, things like that. It's not gonna be enough money, like all these self-doubts.
Yeah.
So it took a little while. And then, of course, like undervaluing myself, not asking for enough. And I'm like, oh, I need to have a full-time job. And this is as a side because it doesn't bring me enough money and things like that. But then as my customer base grew and things like that, I actually ended up purchasing a business from somebody who was retiring. And once you
Mm.
like go through the purchasing of a business, it's like a completely like you're like, oh, I'm like super legit. I have
Right.
like I have all these responsibilities. So
Wow.
yeah, so I would say there was quite a few, but I think all the whole journey helps me understand business owners better because business journey is never a straight line.
It
It
is
is
not.
never.
Mm-mm.
So versus someone who just works for like a CPA firm, and they're just a W-2. Even with
Mm-hmm.
auditors, from the IRS, there's auditors. They don't understand the auditor business, and I had to, it was funny. Was in the middle of an audit and the auditor was talking about vehicles and stuff like that. And he's like, well, I have three personal vehicles. And I was like, do you have a business? Like he was saying that the business owner had three personal vehicles or four. I don't remember how many vehicles they had. And so
Mm-hmm.
the auditor, he's like, well, I have three vehicles. And I'm like, well, do you have a business? You use it 100% for personal because you don't have a business.
Right,
So,
right.
and then with my employees, like my training for them, yeah, they go through the regular training and stuff. But then I'm like, okay, this is how we think. This is what we believe. This is our mission. This is how we communicate with business owners. So I feel
Mm.
like the whole journey helps me understand business owners.
Absolutely. Which is not easy, like we have such a different mentality when it comes to, having to save and in a retirement because like for an entrepreneur, sometimes you get for retirement what's left over, if anything, right? And so
Yeah.
there's not that automatic 401k. There's not that automatic savings. There's not automatic insurance. Like you hope you can afford insurance and you hope you can do this and you hope that you can put money away, but it's not an automatic. It's not like when you're a W-2 employee and you've structured out how your expenses are going to go. Because as an entrepreneur, as you know, there could be one peak month of like really high expenses and your top three clients didn't pay you yet. And so now
Exactly.
you're trying to
I was
figure out
gonna
how to
s-
make that work.
I was gonna say with the entrepreneur, your income is never guaranteed, like a
No.
W-2 job, like a
Hmm.
paycheck job. Like
Yeah,
that's why you have things on automation because
that's
it's a
right.
paycheck.
Yep, 100%. So, all right. So, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
I would say start sooner. Start the
Yeah.
business sooner.
Oh,
Like do
really?
it sooner. Do it now. It's
Mm,
okay. Do it
mm,
now. I was always worried because I didn't have like the bachelor's degree. Like I said, I had the certification and things like that. And so I was always worried, like, oh my gosh, they're gonna ask me, they're gonna ask where I went to school. So I've been doing this for 20 years. Do you know how many people ask where I went to college?
right. Probably
Like
none.
little, like probably three, maybe two or three, you know? And even then they're like, oh, it's okay. When you're a business owner and you're like working with customers, it's always like, what can you do for me? They don't care about you. It's
Yeah.
always like, what can you do for me? And so
Yeah.
that took a while for me to realize, and that's more of a marketing situation. You know, once I like reworded my marketing and put it about the client and nothing about me, then it totally made a shift. But that took years to learn. So I would say it's not about you, it's about the client and start sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good that's a really good point. Okay, so this has been really fun. I appreciate this, Tanya. So, any other advice that you would give to small business owners about cash flow or bookkeeping?
Yeah, so understand, I would say you have to understand how you make decisions
Mm,
because you can listen to business coaches and things like that, but that's not how you make decisions. You have to know what you're comfortable with. Again, like back to should I lease or buy a vehicle? You have to know yourself and then don't be so afraid of bookkeeping. That's your heartbeat. You need to focus on that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, even if you just take, 15 minutes in the morning to go through, you know, a little bit of what's happening for the month and prepare yourself. Just stay on top of it. I agree.
Yeah.
And I say that, and I'm not the best at it, but thankfully I have people who are. One last thing, and this has been really enjoyable, but what do you wish more people knew?
That's a good question. I wish more people knew that if I'm talking about like the business and taxes, I wish more people knew that IRS is made up of people too.
Yeah,
And so there's a person and there's so much gray area and it depends how the IRS agent translates that information. And if you have a business expense in pursuing income for your business, then that's a business expense. And you shouldn't be so scared. As long as you can defend your expense, show how it relates to you earning income, then that's a business expense. But even with like my clients that I have audits for, I'm like, listen, they're IRS people. I know they're mean and things like that, but they're still people. So the first step is to be nice.
yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah, you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. That's for sure. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, thank you so much, Tanya. This has been really fun and hopefully very helpful for all of our listeners.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, you guys, how can people find you, Tanya?
Yeah, so it's just through my website, goldenappleagencyinc.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, just with my name, Tanya Akimenko. And then, of course, we have social media for Golden Apple Agency, Instagram and Facebook. They could find us like that.
Okay, perfect. And you guys can also find her on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time, and until then, step into your own power.